You do realize we're in a pandemic. COVID-19 has entered the chat. Now, I know I'm not the only one that immediately rushes to the comments on a video when you see an influencer not practicing social distancing, not wearing a mask, and completely just disrespecting all COVID protocol. The influencer is going to respond one of three ways once these comments start trickling in. First off, they're not gonna respond and they're just gonna ignore it completely. Second, they will delete the comments and act like it never happened. Or three, they will respond to the comments saying, "Don't worry, we all got tested, we're being super safe." How these people choose to respond to these comments is their business and it's their reputation on the line. But when these influencers are constantly traveling, that's all of our business because it's a complete disregard for public health and the well-being of our community. That is everyone's business. For today's video, we are going to be solely focusing on those influencers who say they are taking all the safety precautions, but unfortunately they are being overly confident in their belief that they are not spreading COVID-19. There are so many influencers that I could use for examples of what not to do during a pandemic, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to start off with Mike Malak. I'm throwing him under the bus, and it's not for a lack of respect. I really like the dude. I've read his book. I own it. I think he's super talented, but unfortunately, he's kind of the poster child of what not to do during a pandemic based on his actions. He combats all these things, saying he's constantly getting tested, he's getting the PCR antigen, both the types of COVID tests frequently. Unfortunately, these claims are all giving him a false sense of blanket security. It's not public information how frequently he is getting tested, but it's very evident based on his digital footprint that after he returns from these trips, he is not self-quarantining, is not in self-isolation for 14 days, he's off to the next place. Influencers think they can buy their way out of the pandemic because they have fame and they have money. Now, money comes into play with this because influencers have expensive PCR and antigen tests literally at their fingertips. Now, for a normal person, you would go make an appointment, wait in the line, get your nose swabbed, get your results within a week. But for these influencers, they don't do that. They have money, they have connections. They buy these tests, which run from $200 to $300 per test. Those tests are giving them results within 24 to 48 hours. Antigen tests, which basically test if you have the active virus in your system, are the least reliable because they're known as rapid tests, especially if the person doesn't have any symptoms. Now, the PCR test is more reliable. However, neither of these tests are 100% foolproof, and no COVID test is foolproof. And in fact, both of these tests have the capability of producing a 50% false negative. Jumping back into Mike, he claims that both of these tests, the only risk associated with them is a false positive. A false positive with COVID tests is very, very, very rare. You're much more likely to get a false negative. So spreading that narrative is straight up misinformation and false. But here is the big problem. Even if you take a PCR antigen test, even if you take 2, 3, you can take as many as you want, they come back negative. It's the isolation period that is the most crucial. Now, it's evident from these influencers' actions that they're not self-isolating.
Like, I'm going to Hawaii. It's November 1st, so it means last night was Halloween. That means I am freaking tired.
Their lives are public. We can see what they're doing. Between the time they take their test, get the results back, or take their test and leave for their trip, they're not self-isolating. We're seeing them at parties, we're seeing them at restaurants, we're seeing them at stores. To get a truly accurate test, by the time you take your test until you get your results back, you need to be completely self-isolating, not, oh, hanging with some friends, even roommates. Like, you need to isolate yourself. And so that's the huge problem when it comes to these influencers, is this false sense of security that they're getting because they get their test back negative. Okay, but in those 24 hours that they're waiting, they're not self-isolating, they're not distancing. It's evident from their actions online. A big problem with influencers is that a lot of them live in content houses with roommates, so the concept of self-isolating isn't plausible. Now, that really goes for anyone. Most of us live with family, friends, we have a roommate. But the difference is, we're not traveling. I mean, some people are, but you shouldn't be. Even if you're taking a private jet, you're still exposing yourself to other people. It's not a matter of the means of transportation that's necessarily the most dangerous. It's when you get to the other destination, especially if it's in a COVID hot zone or if it's international travel where you're potentially bringing a virus to a country that's medical system cannot handle big surges of hospitalizations and cases. I'm not putting all this blame on influencers or even just everyday Americans who are still traveling. The state and federal government has done a very, very poor job of mandating 14-day quarantines after or before a travel. For everyday people who are just used to traveling frequently, that concept is foreign, and so if it's not being enforced, it's gonna be really hard for you to do it on your own will. I can see how it would be difficult, but nevertheless, you should be doing it. We're letting Mike off the hook here, and we're going to move on to another influencer whose actions likely are responsible for hundreds of new COVID cases, and I'm not even gonna say deaths because I think that goes without saying. When you have a high number of cases, that's gonna correlate to a smaller number of deaths. The super spreader herself, Tana Mojo. And in fact, it was actually reported this past summer that she had hosted a party, and after the party, a lot of the guests ended up testing positive for COVID. So this is not just me making a general assumption, but we're gonna take Tana's last 48 hours on social media and just based on that, show how big her social circle is. Tana was in Miami for New Year's Eve. Currently, Florida has over 1 million COVID cases. There have been over 20,000 deaths. It's one of the worst spots for COVID in the entire United States, in the entire world. Not a place you want to be traveling to. She and a couple friends flew there on a private jet. It was her, Cole Kerrigan, Hunter, and a couple of other individuals whom I'm not familiar with. They were on a yacht for New Year's Eve. Remember at the beginning of COVID when that cruise ship had to quarantine like 30 crew members and it was just like a breeding ground for COVID? I'm getting deja vu. It's just not something you want to be doing in the middle of the pandemic, being with a bunch of people on a boat. They were having a New Year's Eve party on a yacht. Jake Paul was at the party. Jake Paul is not exactly the poster child for the CDC, but nevertheless, we're gonna cut him a break. We're just gonna go based on the last 48 hours of what's public information, what's online. We can physically see them being with other people. Jake Paul's friend, John, he's at this party. Tana also lives with at least 2 roommates, I believe. That's Ashley and Imari. I'm sure more people have come and gone into their house. Olivia Ponton, she posted pictures with a couple friends. Tana also posted a picture with a girl named Danielle Melissa. Just based on what we're seeing in 48 hours worth of social media, Tana has surrounded herself with over 10 people, each of those 10 people having a much larger social group, and a lot of that which is not being documented on social media. You might think, okay, it's a party, big whoop, they're outside. Well, no, they're not outside. A yacht has rooms. But the scary part is a lot of these individuals live in LA, and LA County currently has no hospital beds. None. Their ICU is full. They're currently putting patients in gift shops. They're currently putting them in cafeterias. There's no beds. I don't know if these influencers are just not aware that their hospital is at overcapacity. Are they just naive and aren't aware? Either one, inexcusable. 1 in 80 people in Los Angeles has COVID right now. If you're linking that back to this party on New Year's Eve, there were 20 people at this party. I'm sure there are more, but let's just say there were 20. And each person is seeing 4 people. That could be their family members, it could be their waitress at the restaurant. They have had contact with at least 4 people in the last 2 weeks. That's 80 people right there. One person gets COVID in that group, they're spreading it. It's a very contagious virus that if you're not wearing masks and you're not social distancing, it's very plausible that you're either gonna get it and show symptoms or get it and not show symptoms, which is even worse because then you could be unknowingly spreading it. Simple fact is, this is just a pure sign of entitlement. I don't know if any of those people have connections to essential workers, individuals who work in hospitals, but it's really bad out there. And unfortunately, I think they all live in a bubble and thinking that they can buy themselves out of any problem that they encounter, and that's not the truth and that's not the reality. If you look up to any of these people who spent New Year's Eve partying on a yacht with a bunch of people, I strongly urge you to not. By supporting them, you're supporting their actions, and their actions are causing so much harm, even if they don't realize it, even if you don't realize it. These actions of these influencers is just truly exposes the social inequities that this pandemic has made even more visible. Camera died. These influencers have all the means to appropriately social distance, but unfortunately they're taking advantage of the system. Instead, they're traveling all over the US, even internationally, because why not? And they're doing it in the name of supporting the economy, or it's for my job. The CDC has explicitly said many times, avoid all unnecessary travel. You don't get to interpret that to fit your agenda. By you saying, oh, we're traveling to support the economy, there are thousands of ways to support the economy by staying home. But by you traveling constantly, going into international countries and potentially bringing coronavirus there, you are doing anything but helping their economy. The economy is always going to bounce back. It always has. Every single decline, every single natural disaster, the economy has always recovered. You can do your job from your house. Government officials can do their jobs from their house. You can do your job from your house. I work for a cancer nonprofit. I do my job from my house. So does my boss and my boss's boss. People are adjusting and working from home. You can do so as well. To end this video, I just want to thank everyone that has taken this pandemic seriously, who has practiced social distancing, who has been very cautious. That directly translates to respect for our first responders and hospital workers. By you making this huge sacrifice and staying home and postponing plans, you are literally saving lives. Even if you can't see it, you could potentially be the reason someone does not die because you stay home. And to all these influencers making a mockery out of the United States, just being reckless with a full-on disregard for human life, you have a responsibility to do the exact opposite. You have a platform. Use it for good. Don't make excuses for yourself on why you need to be traveling to this place and hanging out with this group or going to this party. There's no excuse for that. Believe me, I want to travel as much as any other person. I would kill to be on a plane right now to literally anywhere, but I know it's not the responsible thing to do, and to me that's worth it. Hopefully that's enough for you too. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.